Have you ever stopped to wonder why some people seem capable of seeing opportunities exactly where everyone else only manages to see problems? Why they are able to walk directly into chaos and somehow come out with clarity, and why they appear calm and controlled precisely when everything around them is falling apart? Because the truth is that it's not luck, it's not talent, and it's definitely not something they were simply born with, but rather a pattern, a hidden way of thinking that most people never develop and never even realize exists. And once you finally see it, you cannot unsee it, because suddenly everything starts to make sense in a way it never did before. Let me ask you something more personal. Have you ever felt like your mind just works differently from the people around you? Like you notice details that others ignore? Like you question things that most people simply accept without thinking twice? Because that feeling is not a flaw or a weakness. It is actually the beginning of something rare. Since rare minds do not necessarily think faster or harder than everyone else, but instead they think differently. And that difference alone has the power to change everything about how they experience life. Most people are conditioned from an early age to follow patterns, to follow rules, to follow trends, and to follow expectations, because from school to work to relationships, they are constantly rewarded for fitting in, for not questioning, and for not disrupting the system. But rare minds break that pattern very early, not because they are trying to be different or rebellious, but because they simply cannot help it, since they feel friction where others feel comfort, and they see contradictions where others see normality, and that is exactly where everything begins to shift. Rare minds do not accept reality at face value. Instead, they dissect it. They pull it apart piece by piece. They ask why things work the way they do, and more importantly, they ask what would happen if they didn't. And that single question has been responsible for changing the world more times than most people can even imagine. Yet there is a part of this that almost no one talks about, which is that thinking differently is deeply uncomfortable and often isolating. When you stop agreeing with everything, people start to notice. When you stop following the script, people begin to question you. And when you start seeing through illusions, you realize there is no going back to the way things used to be. While most people go out of their way to avoid that discomfort, rare minds walk straight into it because they understand something that others don't, which is that real growth only exists on the other side of discomfort. If you think about it carefully, you will notice that most people stay stuck in the same cycles, repeating the same habits, thinking the same thoughts, and producing the same outcomes over and over again, which makes their lives predictable. But rare minds reject predictability because they crave understanding. They chase depth, and they are not satisfied with just having answers. They want to uncover the truth behind those answers, even if that path is uncomfortable or uncertain. Once you start questioning everything around you, you begin to notice just how much of life is built on assumptions, on patterns that people never challenge, and on systems that were never designed to be perfect. And in that moment, you are no longer simply living life, you are analyzing it, deconstructing it, and rebuilding it in your own way, which is exactly what makes rare minds so powerful. Not their intelligence or their IQ, but their perspective. They are able to see angles that others completely miss, to recognize connections that most people overlook, and to identify opportunities that others ignore. Because while the majority of people react impulsively to what is happening in front of them, rare minds take a step back. They observe first. They pause, they process, and they think long-term in a world that is completely addicted to short-term thinking. And that alone gives them a massive advantage. When it comes to decision-making, most people operate based on emotion, acting on impulse, fear, or pressure, reacting quickly to whatever situation they are facing. But rare minds approach decisions differently, by zooming out and seeing the bigger picture, asking themselves what this decision will lead to, what happens next, and what they might not be seeing. And that level of awareness fundamentally changes everything, because it shifts control from the moment to the person. Rare minds are not controlled by what is happening around them. Instead, they control how they respond to it. And this becomes even more powerful when you look at how they deal with failure. Because unlike most people who feel embarrassed or defeated, they become curious, asking what went wrong, what they can learn, and how they can improve, turning failure into data, feedback, and fuel that drives them forward. Over time, this mindset creates an almost unfair advantage, because while others give up, they adapt. While others doubt themselves, they refine their approach. And while others stop completely, they continue moving forward, building resilience not by avoiding pain but by extracting value from it and using it as a tool for growth. When it comes to creativity, most people assume it is about talent in areas like art, music, or design, but that is only the surface level, because true creativity is about the ability to connect ideas, patterns, and concepts that do not seem related at first glance. And rare minds excel at this by taking something ordinary and seeing something extraordinary within it. They combine ideas from completely different worlds to create something new, and that is how innovation actually happens, not by thinking more, but by thinking differently. And the truth that most people ignore is that you do not need more information, you need a new perspective on the information you already have, because rare minds do not consume more, they process deeper. They question what they learn, they challenge it, they test it, and they refuse to accept knowledge blindly, choosing instead to refine it until they truly understand it, which is why they stand out, not because they know more than others, but because they understand things at a much deeper level. Another defining trait of rare minds is that they are not easily influenced, not because they are stubborn or closed-minded, but because they are selective about what they allow into their thinking, filtering opinions, analyzing information, and deciding what truly deserves their attention in a world that is filled with constant noise. Most people waste their attention on distractions like scrolling, comparing themselves to others, and reacting to everything they see, but rare minds protect their attention, they invest it carefully, and they focus only on what actually matters, which creates a level of clarity that most people never achieve. If you stop and think about it, you might realize how rarely you sit in complete silence without any distractions, without your phone, without external noise, just alone with your thoughts, because most people avoid that state, since it forces them to confront their fears and doubts, but rare minds embrace it, because they know that clarity lives in that silence. That is where ideas are born, where breakthroughs happen, and where real thinking takes place, and instead of fearing being alone with your thoughts, rare minds lean into that silence, because they know that is where real thinking happens. Their thoughts. They depend on it, which is why they move through life in a completely different way. When it comes to confidence, most people believe it comes from success, validation, or external results. But that kind of confidence is fragile, because it can disappear at any moment. Whereas rare minds build confidence from understanding themselves, from self-awareness, and from knowing how they think, react, and adapt in different situations. This type of confidence is internal, it is earned over time, and it does not break under pressure, because it is not dependent on approval from others, but rather on experience and self-trust. However, there is something that most people are not willing to admit, which is that thinking differently comes with a cost, because you will feel misunderstood, you will feel out of place, and you will question yourself more often than others, since not following the crowd means standing alone. That feeling is uncomfortable, but it is also where growth happens, because comfort keeps people average, while discomfort forces evolution. And rare minds choose evolution every single time, refusing to settle, refusing to stay stagnant, and refusing to accept anything less than their full potential. They continue to push, explore, and expand because they are able to see possibilities that others ignore, and they refuse to let that potential go to waste, which raises an important question about what would happen if you started thinking this way. If you began questioning more, observing more, reacting less, and focusing deeper, how would your decisions change? How would your relationships evolve? And how would your results improve? Because the way you think ultimately shapes the way you live. And most people never change their thinking, which is why their lives remain the same. But the fact that you are here suggests that something is already different, that you are curious, that you are questioning, and that you are searching for something more. And that is where everything begins, not with action or motivation, but with awareness. Once you become aware of how you think, you gain the ability to change it, to refine it, and to elevate it. And that is the moment when everything starts to shift, because rare minds are not rare due to genetics. They are rare because of the choices they make every single day. The choice to question, the choice to think deeper, discomfort, and the choice to continue growing even when it is difficult. And those same choices are available to you right now, which leads to the most important question of all. What are you going to do with this awareness? Will you return to autopilot in comfort, or will you step into something different? Because once you see the difference, you cannot ignore it. And once you begin thinking differently, you begin living differently. That is where everything changes. And if this made you think, challenged you, or opened something in your mind, then do not stop here, because this is only the beginning. And your mind is far more powerful than you realize, but only if you choose to use it differently.